I'm Amanda McColpin, and I'm a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service contractor and the coordinator for the Prairie Reconstruction Initiative. My co-authors today are Diane Larson from the U.S. Geological Survey and Pauline Drobney, who has recently retired from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Our title is Everyone on the Same Page, the Prairie Reconstruction Initiative Monitoring Protocol. I'd like to start by acknowledging the many people who have helped with this work, including various people and programs from each of our agencies who contributed directly to the products, helped with fieldwork and testing, and provided logistical support and funding. In addition, the members of the Prairie Reconstruction Initiative advisory team were instrumental in bringing these products forward. I would like to point out that although our slides today have the logos of the authors' agencies, the PRI advisory team members are from a number of different agencies, including federal, state, university, and non-governmental organizations that span a number of states in the Prairie region. Just to provide a little background, PRI is a community of practitioners and researchers working together to improve reconstructions. So far, we have focused our activities within two general areas. The first is peer-to-peer learning, including both in-person and online events where the Prairie community can exchange experiences and knowledge. The other is developing tools such as our Vegetation Monitoring Protocol and Prairie Reconstruction Database. It's these tools that I will be talking about today. As I'll show you, the monitoring protocol and the database are meant to work together, but someone could also use either of them separately. A team of practitioners and researchers developed the PRI Vegetation Monitoring Protocol framework using a peer review process overseen by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. This publication is freely available from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service catalog, or SURFCAT, at the URL in the slide. Our goal was to have a protocol that was specific to reconstructions, could be conducted in a reasonable amount of time, and would yield the data the team considered necessary for understanding prairie reconstruction outcomes, including being able to assess the trajectory over time and yield data for objective analyses in order to inform management decisions. The PRI protocol consists of two herbaceous vegetation monitoring methods. The primary information from the meandering walk is a reasonably complete species list. For the nested plots, the basic information is the frequency of occurrence for each species encountered. The meandering walk generally takes less time, but the time required to implement both methods varies with the site size and complexity, with observer experience with the methods, and with the botanical skill of the observer. The two methods are complementary, and we anticipate that people may choose to use both methods on a site, but at different intervals. The biologist or manager will decide on intervals based on the objectives for their sites. The framework provides guidance for developing a site-specific protocol. Sampling is set up in a spatial hierarchy. The broader spatial levels are really for convenience in grouping and keeping track of sites, and different organizations will handle them differently. In general, an overall site is an ownership unit that encompasses several planting units, each of which contains one or more seed mix areas. The primary spatial unit of interest is the seed mix area, which we define as an area that was planted with the same seed mix using the same methods at the same time and is also expected to be managed the same. The idea being that you can follow that spatial unit over time. Although we refer to this as a meandering walk, it is perhaps more correctly termed a botanist-directed walk. An experienced botanist will be able to target areas of a site that likely harbor different or rare species, as well as those areas susceptible to invasive species. This is also what makes this method subjective. No two individuals are likely to approach it in the same way. It's important to make sure to visit all soil moisture classes. We use the NRCS Soil Survey drainage classes and condense them into three basic categories: dry, mesic, and wet. The dashed lines on the figure are only meant to show that one should attempt to cover the entire site, not to prescribe a particular path. During the meandering walk, the observer notes the abundance category of each species using the guidance seen here. This helps to track each species through time. The meandering walk can alert a manager to problems as well as successes. The nested plots are laid out on a grid throughout the seed mix area. Sample points can be delineated using a mapping program such as ArcGIS. We conducted power analyses using simulated data to determine the number of plots needed for a minimum of 10 at the smaller end and a maximum of 40 if the site is larger than approximately 32 acres. The nested plot frame is shown as sections A through D in the figure. It is constructed of PVC. One side can be removed to allow the user to slip it into tall vegetation. Construction details are in the protocol framework that I referenced earlier. To use the nested plot frame, start at A, section A, and record all species rooted in that section. Then examine section B and record all new species rooted there. Note that the area of A and B together is double the area of A, and really plot B is both A and B together, so you've already recorded the species that were in A, so now you're just looking for additional species to get all the species that are in B. And then you continue on to section C and D, and finally flip the plot frame to examine section E, each time recording only the new species that you encounter. And each time you move on to the next section, you are doubling the area again. And then at the end, the total area of sections A through E is 1 square meter. Okay, so why collect data using nested plots? Why not just record all the species found in the entire 1 square meter plot? In the next few slides, I'm going to give an example of a site with 10 plots and 3 species over 2 monitoring events. For ease of viewing, these nested plots are only divided into 3 subsections labeled A, B, and C. Everything recorded in A is automatically in B and C, and likewise anything in B is automatically in C. So this is the first monitoring event. So let's look at the light blue stars. If you look only at section A, the stars are in 4 out of the 10 plots. If you look at section B, in other words, A and B together, the stars are in 6 of the 10 plots. And then finally, when considering the entire plot frame, stars are in all of the plots. And you can do the same analysis for the triangles and the red ovals. Let's say a second monitoring event is conducted a few years later. And this is the second monitoring event, and the table for both the monitoring events is shown. And you would, go through, get the results in the same way that I explained on the previous slide. But in looking at the results, note that for the stars, change is not detectable in C-sized plots because they were in 100% of the plots in both monitoring events. But because you preserved the data for the smaller plots, you can actually use one of them to look for a change in the frequency of stars. And for triangles, kind of the converse is true. The change is not detectable in the smallest size plots, so you need the bigger plots in order to detect a change. And of course, the ovals were not detected in plots at all, and they will only be recorded in meandering walks. Finally, why are we using frequency and not cover, which is used for many vegetation monitoring methods? Well, unlike cover, frequency is much less dependent on season or weather. The size of a plant does not influence its frequency, so it's not necessary to time field work to peak biomass, in other words, peak cover. Also, there's less variation using this method among observers because the only judgment needed is to determine whether the species is rooted within the plot frame. And as I indicated in the cartoon example, as species change in frequency, plot size can always be adjusted retrospectively so that changes can be measured. I want to move on and quickly give you an overview of the PRI database. A PRI team of practitioners and researchers tailored the database to include a standard suite of information that we considered essential to understanding prairie reconstruction outcomes. The main purposes of the database are to document management history and to connect management to monitoring results. We are not telling people how to manage. We want to document what different people are doing. We've gone through several iterations of review and testing and are currently rebuilding the database in ArcGIS Online. And we are very grateful to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for technical assistance with the database. We made the move to ArcGIS Online for a variety of reasons, including being able to capitalize on its spatial power and flexibility, capturing a standard set of data about different reconstructions, having the ability to reach across organizations, having integrated data collection apps, and also having the ability to develop automated data checks and workflows. So looking at the data that is collected in the database, the information can be divided conceptually into different categories, such as site information, highlighted here. For example, where does the site sit in the landscape, and what was the site's pre-planting history? The next step is information about the planting process, such as what kind of site prep was conducted, what was the seed mix, what were the planting methods, and the timing of planting. And as we know, knowledge about ongoing management is extremely important for understanding outcomes. So each action taken is documented, and details about methods, timing, extent, and what triggered the action are documented. And all these things are documented for those same seed mix areas that were used in the monitoring protocol. And finally, there is a module in the database for the PRI monitoring data. The vision is that all these pieces of information can be tied together to better understand the reconstruction process. Okay, so what does it all mean? The analysis and interpretation of the data are important pieces to our understanding. And we see analysis and interpretation happening at two scales. We envision that reports back to users will include simple summaries of their data, as well as evaluating their monitoring data in the context of the history, planting, and management data for their sites. And ultimately, we look forward to having site, planting, management, and monitoring data across many sites and from many organizations, helping us to learn together and reveal pivotal elements that will increase the likelihood that all reconstructions meet expectations. So with participants all using the same monitoring methods and ideally collecting the same management and history data, we will have a lot of power to learn together. Please feel free to contact us at our email addresses or visit the PRI website for more information.